Oh, hi. Welcome to Slovenia!
Dobar dan, my friends. We'd finally arrived in the Balkans. Here I discovered that I knew absolutely nothing about the Balkans and the very recent wars, but also just how beautiful countries like Slovenia are and what a treat it would be to discover them by bike touring. After a couple nights in Kobarid, we were feeling ready and refreshed to tackle what would be the toughest climb of the trip, the Vršić Pass. Now I'm just going to stop for a second here and just state the obvious that I'm not very good at pronouncing Slovenian names and just foreign names in general. I'm trying my best, and if I totally mess it up, then don't judge me and get over it. We'd been messaging my friend Callum, who had pals in Slovenia, and put us in touch with Tina. She basically gave us a full itinerary of routes and places to visit, which was perfect for us because we usually just make it up as we go along. The plan was to follow the Socha River through the valley and up into the Julian Alps, where we'd climb over the Vršić Pass. After that, we'd make our way to Poljana via Lake Bled and spend a few days with Tina. In the morning, we remarkably got up at 5 AM, but due to eating a giant breakfast, we weren't really on the road till about 8 o'clock. Still, this was pretty early for us. It was some beautiful riding, following the river. Everything here is just so lush. We stopped off for a coffee and got some new stickers for our bike, and then continued up the Socha Valley with the mountains looming over us. In the afternoon, we stopped off for a sandwich by the river. Honestly, one of the best spots for snacks, so nice, and I was super tempted to jump in, but I was afraid that I wouldn't dry off in time, and nobody wants to cycle up a mountain with soggy cycling shorts.
Well, we're gonna head up over the pass. It's 1600 meters, and then we're gonna continue down to Lake Bled, and then we're gonna continue zigzagging around the country, enjoying the scenery, enjoying the much cheaper beer, which is a big deal because I'm tired of paying 7 to 8 euros for a pint, which is just unacceptable. But now it's under 3 euros. Everything's great.
See you later.
We made it to the base of the mountain and started to climb. It's kind of hard to describe what it's like. I mean, we ride pretty heavy, so you really feel steep gradients, and you can be reduced to slower than a walking pace with each pedal wearing you out even more. It took us about 3.5 hours to get to the top, with the last 9 kilometer stretch of switchbacks at about 14% gradient. To put that in a very specific Glasgow perspective, Gardiner Street in Partick is about 8%, so you can imagine how difficult it is. The toughest thing I find about this type of cycling is your mental state. Your body is screaming, and that very directly translates to your inner voice being like, what the fuck are you doing? Are you crazy? You should obviously not be doing this, and stopping is clearly the obvious choice. Combining that voice and finding some sort of calm is incredibly difficult. Everyone has a different technique. For me, it's about deep breathing, which gets harder as you go, as your lungs start to burn. But it's honestly key to climbing up like this, because the more you start to breathe very quickly, the more likely you are to hyperventilate, and that just gets you into all sorts of trouble. Next up, I try to get in the zone. My zone is like a super state of zen, or like calm, and sometimes involves repeating something cheesy about completing the challenge, or like a positive affirmation, some sort of mantra that you can focus on that feels really good and definitely keeps the negative thoughts away. Sometimes I also imagine that I'm lying in my room on my bed with the sun shining through the window. It's like a super duper chill scenario where I'm just lying there being like, I'm so glad I'm lying on my bed, when in reality I'm like almost crying with pain. We continued zigzagging our way to the top. We took breaks when we could, but it's really so steep that it's very hard to find a good spot to stop, and more importantly, it's very difficult to start again because you're pedaling from an uphill position. There just isn't really much flat to get a bit of a run at it. When we hit the last 9 kilometers, it really got extreme, and I almost started to sort of hallucinate. And at these sort of points, you're so completely out of it with so much dopamine and adrenaline rushing through you. I think that you just start to imagine shit. For me, I saw James Hetfield just at the side, pure going, yeah, which I know sounds ridiculous, but it got me to the top anyway. I like encouragement from members of Metallica when I'm cycling, obviously. Now, if you have any of your own ways of keeping sane when you're on a massive climb, then do pop a comment below. I'd love to read them and compare them with my own. I do realise that this all sounds pretty masochistic, but when you reach the summit, there is such a sense of achievement. The whole thing is just such a rush, and it is completely worth it. We got treated to some beautiful views and lucked out as the weather cleared up for us just in time, and spent a while basking in the glory of having made it to the top by bicycle.
Wait, go do it again.
On the other side, we started to make our way down. Again, the views were stunning, but for some reason they'd cobblestoned it, which made for a very bumpy ride down, and there was a lot of braking as there's just so many steep switchbacks.
Who the fuck put all these cobblestones? Cobblestones. Cobblestones in a big hill pass. Come on. What's this shit? Get the fuck out of here with this bullshit.
Obviously, it's still so much fun, and the views do make up for it. You also get so much more time to appreciate them than if you were in a car. As we started making our way to the bottom, some big storm clouds rolled in, so we dived into a bar for a coffee. It was good timing because if we'd been going up when it started to rain, we'd been completely miserable, and I don't know who would have made it. At the cafe, this California man came over and started to chat to us. He was all the stereotypes of an American tourist. And at one point though, he was like, oh yeah, my mom was in this Belgium concentration camp. And I was like, bro, this is like a bit heavy for like the first time we've had a conversation. Nevertheless, he managed to take a picture of us, which was nice, because you rarely get photos of you together. But yeah, he was a bit much.
The flash on. Is this the flash?
It should just be auto, I think.
When the rain stopped, we started making our way towards Dovje, which was an easy 25 kilometers, all downhill, no braking, no pedaling, just chilling on a very excellent cycle path. I was clearly too zoned out to take any pictures or videos of where we stayed, but it was a really nice campsite, and I think we must have looked completely shattered because a nice Czech woman came over and gave us some nice hot mugs of tea, which was very much appreciated. We had a pizza and then totally conked out. The next day we started making our way towards Lake Bled. It was largely downhill again, and it was a nice easy ride. When we got to the lake though, it wasn't really our vibe at all. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's so touristy, and it was full of teenagers listening to dance music and all going a bit mad and swimming about and just going bonkers. I'm up for that sort of stuff, but when we were with our bikes, we were just keen to move on. We continued our way towards Lake Bohinj to a campsite. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but I'm going with Bohinj. We got to the campsite and it was good, but again, it was also super duper busy. There was even queues to get in. Still, I was digging how much everything seemed to be about adventure sports and just being outside. The next morning, we had a pretty chonky breakfast of porridge, fruit and granola and chocolate. It's super filling and it became a bit of a staple of our morning routine. But no matter how much we ate in the morning, we still usually got hungry after about an hour. Such is the way of bike touring. We stopped off on the lake for some stone skimming, which I have to say, I think I'm pretty decent at. Probably at around about a championship level. After a bit of confusion about which Pollyanna we were heading to, we marked out our route. The going was fine, but we started to climb so much and it's starting to get pretty steep. Lily and I were both a bit surprised by this and also pretty frustrated. We hadn't really read the map properly, so it was a bit of a shock to both of us when we found out that we were actually climbing over another mountain pass. Not as bad as the Vizich Pass, but still about 1200 meters, which is quite high and obviously quite difficult as well, especially if you're not prepared for it. Still though, as usual, coming down the other side makes it all worth it, and it was beautiful riding through the picturesque towns in the middle of the valley. At one point we saw some signs for roadworks and we hesitated about which way to go. We stopped a car who was coming from that direction, and the guy had a massive spliff and he's hanging out the window. He's like, yeah, it'll be fine. So remarkably, we were just like, let's just trust this guy. And even though we did get stuck behind the digger, it was totally fine. And so the lesson here is always trust people who smoke joints while driving cars. We zoomed along towards Skofja Loka, which is incredibly difficult to say, and as we were coming into town, a car stopped, and within a few minutes all our bags were in this woman's car and she was driving off with them. And we started standing there like, what the fuck just happened? Clearly our last few days of cycling had made us rather spaced out, but basically Tina, whose house we were on our way to, had guessed roughly what we would be coming into the town, had driven, spotted us, and it was like, I'll take your bags and meet you at the house. But it all just happened so quickly, and afterwards we're like, who actually was that? She's got her ID, her money, her wallet. Was that Tina? Who knows? All this stuff is now just in a stranger's car. Thankfully, Tina didn't just do a runner and the address she'd given us was correct. It was actually so class of her to do that, because even though the balance was a bit weird to get used to at first, it meant that we could actually bomb it to Pollyanna. Staying with Tina and Pollyanna was amazing. Her and her family and friends completely took us in and looked after us the whole time. She'd stocked the fridge with food and beer, showed us around, invited us out to the bar with her friends to watch the World Cup games, as well as to their house at one point. We had a good night of boozing, and every time we were getting ready to go, Andras and Dave were like, come on, just another quick one, just a quick one. And I'm pretty easily influenced, so it was a very late night, but a lot of fun. We went on a day trip to a cave and then had a barbecue at our brother's. Honestly, it was just such a nice couple of days. And this might sound strange, but one of the best things was that Tina gave us the chance to really recuperate. She worked during the day and just left us to do pretty much nothing but sleep and lie around and get all our strength back. It was exactly the kind of rest days that we needed.
We're heading to Ljubljana.
Around this time as well, Croatia made it to the finals of the World Cup, and all of a sudden we had a major opportunity. If we took a bit more of a direct route, we could get to Zagreb for the World Cup finals and be in the capital when Croatia would play France. This was too good an opportunity to miss. We plotted the route and raced our way towards Zagreb. It did mean that we didn't get as much of a chance to explore other parts of Slovenia, but we did at least get to visit Ljubljana for a couple of hours, which is definitely on the list for a future city break. We camped for the night at Vishna Gora, at a particularly weird campsite. It was sort of like a tennis academy or club or something, and it was just us and this other camper van there. The whole setup was a bit odd, and when I went to pay, the owner didn't charge us because we were on bikes, which was super nice of him, but he was also like, come to the disco tonight. We had our dinner and I just felt so guilty about us maybe not going to the disco because we were quite tired, but since we hadn't paid, I felt like we were obligated to go and check it out. But when we went to the disco, it was just him watching tennis matches, but with like disco lights and very, very loud music, and so we couldn't actually really talk about anything. We woke up a bit hazy to a beautiful morning and then got ready. Booked ourselves an Airbnb in Zagreb and then started the last leg of our jaunt to make it for the World Cup finals. We were so chuffed that we were actually going to get there in time. and amazed at our dumb luck for timing. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you have any techniques for cycling uphill and getting in the zone, I'd love to hear them in the comment. And make sure you subscribe for next week's episode, where I lead us into a humongous crowd of extremely drunk Croatians with fully loaded touring bikes, and we basically get trapped.